Hi, and welcome to Present Pilgrimage, the podcast where we explore current affairs through a spiritual lens. I'm Jennifer Winninger. I'm a white woman born in Atlanta, Georgia. I have lived in 2 African countries and visited over 25 countries all over the world. Once married to an Egyptian Muslim, I have 2 biracial and multicultural children.
I'm Iyabo Onipede. I'm a multicultural, biracial immigrant woman of color, and I have this unwavering belief that every single life has immense and incredible value. My core values center around compassion, equity, and justice.
Some of the questions Iyabo and I want to ask you all and talk about are, how can some of our more dehumanizing and limiting behaviors be examined, looked at, and transformed? Can we learn how to train ourselves to behave more humanely towards others who are seemingly different from us? Can we learn to quiet the voices of fear and suspicion and open ourselves up to connection, learning, and understanding some of our core values?
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Jennifer and I invite you to tap into your core values and join us on this journey as we explore current issues. Might we all begin to view the world through these amazing lenses of our deepest core values? Welcome to Present Pilgrimage.
Welcome back, everyone. In this podcast, we are going to talk about the power and influence of music on different generations, different trends in music, what a lot of musicians are focused on. And for my son, I was talking to Iyabo. My son is half Egyptian, half American, growing up in the South in the U.S., and he's 15, and a lot of he and his friends completely have immersed themselves in the world of hip-hop and rap. And Atlanta has a huge music culture going on right now. It's really blossoming. There are all these really interesting hip-hop and rap artists coming out of Atlanta in the scene. Their backgrounds, though, you would say, if you looked at my son's background, and theirs are very, very different. So they talk in a very real way about growing up the way they did, the challenges they faced. They talk about relationships. They talk about, certain, I think, things that are associated with the hip-hop culture, like drugs, women, which in some ways it makes me uncomfortable because some of it can be very derogatory. And when I ask my son what he identifies with about it, and he says, Mom, they're speaking from their experience. It's very real. This is their life. I appreciate so much about the musicality and the musicmanship of a lot of the hip hop and rap songs that I hear that are played that he likes. So I appreciate that part. So I'm just kind of seeing him really just immersed in this.
Now, Jennifer, I don't have kids of my own, and so I don't have to worry about what's influencing a particular kid. But we always have to remember, like, the trauma we put our parents through, when we grew up so different. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite stories that pops in my head about this kind of thing is when I learned when I was struggling with Shakespeare in high school. Mm-hmm. And I learned that Shakespeare was considered very crass and street, as opposed to, like, Chaucer. I think Chaucer was much more sophisticated and higher level stuff. And when Shakespeare launched whatever he did in his career with his writings, people were aghast. The parents, he appealed to young people.
Yeah.
And the parents were stunned and
he made
shocked.
Bawdy jokes.
Right. He was bawdy and down to earth for the uptight English people.
Yeah.
And so I think each generation has their own expression, and I do think it's important as parents to guard and get your kids thinking about what is this saying. In my time, parents were worried about us listening to love songs. When you talk about rap, I think of my favorite rapper ever was LL Cool J, and I Need Love.
Awesome.
You know, and parents didn't want us listening to that stuff like, oh my God, they're going to just go out the street looking for love in all the wrong places. Or like even the Sugar Hill Gang, which was the first rap song I ever really heard. And I think for me personally, rap overall is a music I don't feel a lot of resonance with overall. Kind of like country music or other things, because I'm not musically inclined. Two, I don't really understand a lot of words that are being said. The rhythm and cadence of it is foreign to my ear, and music is just not that important to me. And when I do like music, I like ballads. I like Lauryn Hill, Sade, Anita Baker. And, you know, I'm just kind of old school. Those are the folks I like. There's some new folks I like. I love Alicia Keys. I love John Legend. I am in love with Ed Sheeran, the English musician. So there's some pop stuff I listen to. Some mostly R&B. I'm more R&B, and I like melodious tunes and stuff like that. But I think music is one of the ways our kids find their expression.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like their clothing and some of their interests.
And I think music was so important to me growing up. You know, my mom listened to like Crystal Gayle and Elvis Presley and Fleetwood Mac, and some of those were great, and I did. But then, you know, pop came along, and it was Madonna and Janet Jackson and Michael Jackson and all this great, which it was such a part of my growing up. And she probably had no clue. My mom probably couldn't even tell you one song that Michael Jackson has sung. So, and then NWA came out when I was at Brown, and it was all these Ivy League kids, like, just eating it up. NWA, Public Enemy, Straight Outta Compton, you know, such great social critique. I mean, they were so bold and totally identified with all that. So that's why I feel like, okay, this is his this is his way of expressing himself, of connecting to that, his generation. So, you know, as I said, a mixed kid growing up in the South, and, you know, middle class neighborhood, you know, listening to these real expressions, to these voices and songs and stories of these young men who, a lot of them did grow up in Atlanta also. Some of them went to some schools in this area. Some went to, to school in different parts of the state and had a lot tougher struggles. And they speak about that. So it's very fascinating to me.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. What worries you, beyond the misogyny in some rap, not all rap, what worries you about your kid listening to rap music?
Nothing really worries me except what you just said, that one thing. It's interesting to me to see what he's identifying with listening to that.
Well, let me put it to you this way. Does it bother you that your kid is identifying with what's clearly African American music? Like, do you feel he's identifying with something that's foreign, that should be foreign to him?
You know, I don't want to say cultural appropriation, because it is music. It's an industry. You know, they want to sell albums. They want to get, that's part of when you want to produce and market your song. But he didn't live that life. He can't identify intimately with a lot of what the experience is. Not to say that, and in the end, it doesn't really bother me, I guess. Right. I just, it's interesting to see him become so immersed in it, and I think it gives him a voice.
Yeah. Well, this thing of cultural appropriation, in certain circles, it's a hot button topic. So cultural appropriation is like when you say, Jennifer, what's your spirit animal? That's taking something that's very sacred to Native American culture and trendifying it, for lack of a better word, right? Yeah. Making it a trend, and people get into yoga for the health benefits, which is there. Yeah. But then all of a sudden, overnight, some people become gurus, and they go to ashrams, and not to say you cannot pursue a legitimate pursuit of this faith or spirituality. Those are issues of cultural appropriation. I know that bright colored Ankara African fabric. To some people, it's going through cultural appropriation in that there are people wearing it that don't have any connection with the culture,
Yeah.
right?
And I think, white people don't recognize how guilty they are of so much cultural appropriation. And that's maybe my little piece of, okay, it's just this another trend that, and he's not completely white like me, but I mean, that's our
but
history.
To me, he looks Jewish. He doesn't look Egyptian. He doesn't look white. He certainly doesn't look black.
Ask him his brother. So
yeah, he has that big, beautiful curly hair. But I mean, I think that the takeaway for our listening audience is that there will be overlaps and stuff comes up that may or may not be. The most important thing you're doing is questioning. And I'm sure, knowing you've had conversations with him that make him think about it. But the other piece is growing up in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like he's in Dubuque, Iowa,
yes.
and doesn't see black people. His classmates are black. He has black classmates. He has black friends.
My daughter's 55-60% African American in her school. Now when we travel to Tennessee or to other states in the region, they remark and say, "Wow, there are not a lot of black people here." They're much more immersed.
So it could be cultural appropriation, but it also could just be this is who they're comfortable being around.
Yeah, I think.
And they've adopted, like if you raised your kids in Nigeria,
yes,
and they were listening to Fela and.
Yes.
Simi Dele Simi Sola is a young Nigerian artist, and Ajay is another one. If they were listening to that, that's the milieu they're in. Mm-hmm. They're affected and impacted by these things. But what else would they be listening to?
Right, yeah.
Like, who else would they? Ed Sheeran?
Yeah, I don't know.
Who else would they be listening to? Who are the young pop? Like, not only is rap music a legit, up front center genre, it is like dominating in the music world. Yeah. So it is what they're exposed to. I'm going to argue it's not cultural appropriation and that it's natural and normal and healthy. And as parents, we have to we have to get them questioning some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm wrong. I wonder what our listeners think.
No, I'm glad that he's not interested in like Vanilla Ice or, like white rappers. I mean, Eminem, I think maybe an exception. There is a lot of talk about, if he's a legitimate rapper, but, definitely appreciating, the real environment where this has grown and come from and,
So let me tell you one really fantastic story about this issue of cultural appropriation, and I'm going to tick off some people with this. So when Beyonce did Lemonade, right, mm-hmm. she reflected the Yoruba goddess Oshun, and I am Yoruba. And I immediately heard about all she was doing, and she actually used a lot of Nigerian artists, Yoruba artists specifically, for like the dotting on the face and stuff, and this was a huge big deal. And I found myself, my emotional reaction, I care for Beyonce. I think she's amazing. I think she's a phenomenal businesswoman, but I know one or two of her songs. I'm just not a music person is more the issue. And I found my emotional reaction being one of, who the heck does she think she is to just co-opt the goddess Oshun like that? Well, okay, she's African American. The entire continent, I believe, belongs to all of us and all of African Americans and black people distributed all over the planet. That's my belief. All of it. So if you find yourself in Kenya, you welcome home. If you find yourself in Egypt, welcome home. If you find yourself in Yoruba land, welcome home. So I quickly switched off of that. But I also felt like this is our religion and it's sacred. Mm-hmm. And what are you doing with pop music with it, right? And I had a reaction, well, let me tell you something. I have a very, very good friend. His name is Jacob Olupono. He is a professor of African religion at Harvard University. His daughter and I are also friends. So I pinged her on Facebook and I said, why am I having these feelings, right? And the reason I'm taking our listeners through this process is we always think, oh, people just have these grand ideas and they've landed on them or something. I actually don't trust people who don't wrestle with the ideas and where is this rooted in? Is this who I want to be with this thought? Because we have choices, right? Everything we do is a choice. So I pinged her to rub it up against her and say, what are you thinking? She said, girl, I'm feeling the same way. I am ticked off about this. And so she did a podcast and she invited her father on the podcast. And he was doing some sabbatical work in Germany. And she rants and raves and says, Daddy, I don't know how I feel about this, and da-da-da-da-da. Is Beyonce taking away our culture, da-da-da? And he said, listen. And he talked about how civilizations grow and develop. And that Yoruba indigenous religion is actually a world religion because we have adherents both in the Yoruba land, in Brazil, throughout Latin America, Trinidad, throughout the globe. There are people that practice Yoruba religion. So it no longer belongs to us that have the land where the Yoruba are rooted and grounded in. And so he felt that by the religion becoming more mainstream, it was not cultural appropriation, it is the effect of a world religion.
And that's a good thought to use when looking at the spread of other religions as well.
Yeah. So like yoga and Buddhism. And, those types of things. So that gave me a lot of peace. Also, I have such tremendous respect for him. Like, I was like, okay, I'll just go back in my little box with this.
Yeah,
and it was
found
great.
The right person to reflect on that.
Yeah, and that was so awesome.
Yeah.
But, Jennifer, I want to close us out with this my story of American music. Okay. So, as you guys know, I was 16 years old when I came to America. And I went to an all-women's college in 1981. It was at Goucher College in Towson, Maryland. And they rented a couple of dorms out to Towson State University guys. And there were these two black guys on campus that came after my girlfriend who was from Liberia and me.
So wait, how long were you in the States at this point?
Oh, like 3 months.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So like 3 months. So it was like October 1981. And they invited us. They bought tickets. They saved up their little money. And they invited us to the Rick James and Tina Marie concert. Woo! And I was so excited. Fire and Desire, right? So that you can tell like my genre of music. So we go to this concert. First of all, I had never been to a concert of this size or type. So it was my first American. Oh my God! It was at like some big center. Arena. I can't it's like going to the Georgia Dome today, right? And then Tina Marie had on this pink spandex bodysuit, one piece, no belt, nothing. And so first I was like shocked because remember, this is 1981. We didn't have music videos like we do now. So I didn't have a visual of Fire and Desire. What?
Rick James or Tina Marie.
Rick James or Tina Marie. And remember, he's talking about hair. Remember his hair?
Long hair.
So at some point during this concert, Tina Marie lays on the ground and Rick James proceeds to lick her from the tip of her big toe to the top of her head. And I was ready to pass out. Whereupon I turned around to look at my date in the eye because he was much taller than me and standing behind me because we were standing in the front area of the concert. And he was smoking a joint. Oh my God. I was ready to find a canoe and paddle across the Atlantic Ocean and go back home. I was horrified. I thought this is too sexual. This is too obscene. And it just did not feel, it took me way out of my comfort zone. And I felt so shocked by American music concepts and stuff. Because at home, even our political music, like Fela and stuff, is not about sexuality. Now, of course, today, these young kids are doing it better than the Americans are doing it.
I bet.
So that's my music story with American music.
So some cultural some cognitive dissonance, a little frame of reference, and some wow.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
All right. Thank you, everyone.